forget some of the things that I've done. I wish there was some way I could change the past, but I know it's too late for us now. Changing things wouldn't mean a thing to you.
Next is
Good. Yate, Chairman Simpson, it's good to see you again. Ranking Member Pingree, Yate, members of the committee, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to share a few minutes with you all today. My name is Dr. Buu Nygren, Navajo Nation President. It's an honor to serve in this capacity. So again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a few words on behalf of the largest land-based tribe in America with over 400,000 citizens. Despite our size, we continue to face the same challenges as you've heard throughout this afternoon, is that Indian country continues to struggle with generations of crumbling infrastructure, limited access to health care, underfunded law enforcement, and an ongoing fight for clean water. These issues aren't just numbers in a budget. They represent the daily realities of Navajo families and Indian families across Indian country as well. So today I'm here to remind, as you've heard today, the federal government's trusts and treaty responsibilities to the Navajo people are not optional, that they are not tied to political cycles, and they are promises that must be kept. And sequestration and budget caps threaten the critical services our people rely on. These cuts don't just mean fewer dollars, they mean elders waiting longer for medical care, families struggling without running water, and emergency responders stretched even thinner across the Navajo Nation at 27,000. Navajo programs should not be subjected to the same cuts as discretionary spending. And we urge you to exempt Indian country programs from sequestration and provide stable and advanced appropriations for both Indian Health Services and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Public safety is another crisis we cannot ignore. Right now, the Navajo Nation only has 218 officers to patrol a landmass the size of West Virginia. That's one officer covering hundreds of square miles throughout the day. Response times can stretch for hours, leaving families very vulnerable. Just last year alone, the Navajo Police Department received over 200,000 calls, more than they could ever respond to with the current staffing needs of 218. We need more Navajo police officers, additional resources, and full funding for our law enforcement so that we can continue to make sure that our families still feel very safe throughout the day. And when visitors crisscross our lands from Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, they feel protected as they travel through our nation. Emergency medical services are also in dire need of support. When someone calls for an ambulance, they may be waiting up to 45 minutes or longer if an ambulance is even available. As I mentioned, the Navajo Nation spans one of the most iconic areas in southwestern part of the United States. And there's times when we have non-Navajos that travel through our nation. And when ambulances are called for, that takes 45 to an hour. Sometimes it all depends on availability. So my hope is that we can continue to make sure that we support our EMS teams to answer. They answer currently 20,000 calls a year, and their funding increases haven't been increased in decades. This is a matter of life and death. We ask for a dedicated funding for our tribal EMS, including a $4 million allocation specifically for the Navajo Nation. And then our children's futures are at stake as well. When it comes to the Indian Child Welfare Act, it was designated to keep Native children connected to their nation, their culture, and their identity. Our Navajo ICWA program faces a $3.4 million shortfall. Without full funding, we cannot provide the protection and the services our children deserve. This is not just a budget request. It's about keeping our families whole. Another challenge we face is the lack of broadband access across the nation. In 2025, reliable internet should not be a privilege. As mentioned earlier, 27,000 square miles, the size of West Virginia, that we should have the broadband that's needed. In many Navajo households, parts of Navajo, students still have to travel very long distances just to get connected to the internet while sitting in vehicles. An example, some of them sit out fast food restaurants, gas stations, or try to be able to find internet at the local chapter houses. Again, clinics struggle to offer telehealth. Businesses cannot be competitive. Congress must continue to help us with tribal broadband and continue to make it a priority to increase funding to ensure tribes have access to spectrum to build their own networks. And also, I cannot leave today without speaking about the unfinished business of uranium cleanup. As mentioned, over the years, there's over 500 abandoned mines still contaminate our lands, our water, and our people. Some progress has been made. Very thankful that we have started, but at this rate, it will take centuries to fix the damage that has caused with uranium mining all across Navajo. We need a real commitment from the federal government with a long-term funding plan that fully addresses this toxic legacy. Lastly, water is life. The Navajo Nation has waited for too long for the water rights settlements we are owed. These settlements are not just obligations, they are necessary for the survival of our communities. A future cannot be built without water. We urge this committee to ensure full funding and implementation of these settlements. Despite all of the challenges that we face, many people continue to step up. Our people continue to step up time and time again to provide support to the United States. Our Navajo co-talkers and Navajo uranium miners sacrificed so much to make this country what it is today. The treaty signed with our ancestors were not symbolic. They were promises made between our nations so that we can all thrive. We kindly ask the United States to respect the Navajo Nation and uphold their end of the treaty. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Hill.
Yes, Suguli Sogawake. Greetings, everyone. Honorable Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree and members of this committee. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of the Oneida Nation. The Oneida Nation is a Title IV and Title V self-governance tribe that serves a tribal population of 17,308 citizens. Oneida Nation has a $750 million annual economic impact in our region and is one of the largest employers in Brown and Outagamie counties, with approximately half of our 2,390 employees being non-Oneida individuals from neighboring communities. Our government provides an array of services to our community. Employees and tribal citizens include healthcare, behavioral health services, police protection, housing, public works, sewer and water infrastructure, family and child welfare services, environmental, health, safety, banking, childcare, education, educational programming, food security, transportation, and more. One of the areas is the exempt tribal programs from funding pauses and staffing reductions. As the current administration works to implement new policies, we urge Congress to work with tribes to educate administration officials as to our unique government-to-government relationship and to use federal resources to fulfill the treaty and trust responsibility to tribal nations. The United States fulfills its trust and treaty obligations through both the direct delivery of tribal programs and services and through provisions of federal funding to tribal nations. These funds help us deliver essential tribal programs, including healthcare, public safety, and education. These programs are not discretionary. They are legal obligations rooted in treaty and trust obligations, the United States Constitution, and longstanding federal statutes. Our request is to make it clear that all federal programs that serve tribes should be exempt from funding pauses and staffing reductions. Clear guidance from Congress and the administration is needed to protect tribes from inadvertent harm and to ensure that tribal access to federal resources appropriated by Congress is not interrupted. The next subject would be support for expansion of tribal self-governance. As Congress considers policies to increase efficiency and reduce bureaucracy, I'd like to point out a successful Indian policy that helps achieve these goals: tribal self-governance. Tribal self-governance reduces federal bureaucracy, expands local decision-making and control, gives tribes greater flexibility to redesign programs and plan for the long term. This has led to better services and improved health, welfare, and quality of life for tribal citizens. Self-governance has been transformational for the Oneida Nation, providing a great control over our healthcare programs and law enforcement, which has allowed us to focus our efforts on prevention and empowering our nation to build capacity by training our own citizens to fulfill these roles. The nation strongly encourages Congress to expand tribal self-governance authority to other federal agencies that serve tribes, including authorizing self-governance demonstration projects for tribal programs within the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and authorizing permanent self-governance authority to the USDA for food distribution, self-determination demonstration project. Law enforcement. Oneida Nation is proud to operate our own police department covering reservation boundaries of over 100 square miles and over 27,000 residents. We have established collaborative relationships and parity with local law enforcement agencies through intergovernmental agreements, and our officers are cross-deputized by county sheriffs. Unfortunately, tribal law enforcement remains extremely underfunded by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, with Oneida Nation receiving less than $140,000 annually for law enforcement through its 638 Self-Governance Compact. This covers less than 3% of the annual operating cost of the Oneida Police Department. The current funding covers the partial salary for one officer out of 30 plus positions in the Oneida Police Department. Last year alone, the nation contributed over $5 million to operate our police department. We are fortunate to have resources to cover these costs, but many other tribes throughout Indian country do not. Even with our budget contributions, our police department still has unmet needs that remain unfunded. Tribes in public law 280 states like Oneida Nation also face the misperception that we do not have public safety needs. This could not be further from the truth. Our police department responds to thousands of calls for services each year within the boundaries of the reservation, with over 18,000 calls in 2023 alone. Due to lack of funding, our police department is consistently short-staffed. This is a public safety concern. Operating at minimums allows us to respond to one serious call, accident, or medical situation at a time. With additional public safety funding, we would be able to hire more officers, providing a better service to our community, as well as expand our programming to hire community resource officers to help prevent and deter crime. Oneida Nation strongly supports increased Bureau of Indian Affairs law enforcement funding for all tribal public safety programs, including those in public law 280 states. Increased tribal law enforcement funding would provide transformational relief to address the systematic public safety issues facing our tribal nations. There are dozens of other vitally important programs within the Interior, Environment, and related agencies, appropriations bills that are important to the Oneida Nation, but however, in the interest of time, I'll conclude my remarks. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Guy?
Is that on? There
Yep.
we go. Clark Butchquash. Hedge not talk to Queen Niles. Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of this subcommittee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify before you here this afternoon. My name is Guy Capoman. I'm the president of the Quinault Indian Nation. Quinault Indian Nation is located in the southwestern corner of the Olympic Peninsula. We have over 200,000 acres of land within our reservation. Forests, rivers, lakes, mountains, 30 miles of coastline, and over 4,000 enrolled tribal members. Today, I'll focus my testimony on several critical issues, including number one, the executive order freezing IRA and BIA and OMB funding. Number two, increased funding for the BIA Tribal Community Resiliency Program. And number four, advanced appropriations for Indian health services. Through treaties and executive orders and other agreements, Indian tribes, including the Quinault Indian Nation, ceded hundreds of millions of acres of our homelands to the federal government. In return, the United States made promises to provide for education, health, and welfare of our tribal citizens. For the Quinault people, the promises of the United States were detailed in the Treaty of Olympia of 1855. Unfortunately, the federal government has consistently failed to meet those treaty obligations. Chronic underfunding, worsened by economic factors like inflation, continues to impede the Quinault Nation's ability to deliver essential services to our tribal members. We have been forced to supplement inadequate federal funding to meet those needs of our tribal members. On January 20th, 2025, the administration issued an executive order titled Unleashing American Energy, which halted disbursements for programs funded under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. This funding freeze has significant detrimental impacts on the Quinault Indian Nation and other tribes as well. The decision to freeze funding that Congress has already appropriated for tribal nations is unacceptable to the Quinault Indian Nation. Such actions undermine the federal government's trust and treaty responsibilities to tribes, disrupt our essential programs, and hinder tribal efforts to address urgent challenges such as infrastructure development, public safety, and cultural preservation. We respectfully urge the subcommittee to work with the administration to immediately unfreeze these funds and ensure that tribal nations, including the Quinault, can access those funds. As we have previously testified to the subcommittee, Quinault has two major villages, a village of Queets and a village of Tahola. And we're in the process of relocating those villages to higher grounds. And through the high tides, high winds, and storm surges, it creates a safety hazard for our tribal members. To continue the process of relocating those villages to higher ground, we need additional funding to do that. Because of this urgent need to expedite the relocation, we asked the subcommittee to increase the funding to the BIA Tribal Climate Resiliency Program to $50 million in FY26. And this will ensure that we can continue that process. In 2023, the subcommittee made historic strides in safeguarding the health and well-being of tribal communities by securing advanced appropriations for Indian Health Services funding for 24 and 25. We thank you for that. Thank you for that. We request that the subcommittee include advanced appropriations funding for Indian Health Service for fiscal year 27 at a minimum of $5.2 billion as part of fiscal year 26 Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill. The Quinault Indian Nation remains steadfast in our commitment to protecting our tribal members, our lands, and our culture from the adverse impacts of systematic underfunding, environmental threats, and violence against Indian populations. However, we cannot achieve these goals alone. And as our trustee, we're asking for your help to do these things. And with that, we thank you, Sioquio, for this time to talk to you here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here and for your comments and suggestions. I've been up to in fact, two of the most enjoyable days I've had in a long, long time, several years ago when David Obey took me up to the Apostle Islands. And I still want to go up there and spend like a week out on one of the lighthouses and just stay there, because beautiful country, but it is, yeah. So you do the wild rice up there? Yeah. Great. How did the Oneida Indians get from, they were in New York originally, right?
Correct. Yeah. We
Now you're in
moved
Wisconsin?
to what was then called the Michigan Territories in the 1820s and 30s. So we were moved to Wisconsin before Wisconsin was a state.
Okay. Interesting. As you know, we went down to our committee, several of us went down to the Navajo Reservation, and I fell in love with Window Rock. I want a house there. It's beautiful country there, but we'll get down there again.
Yes.
I
that'd be great.
appreciate it.
Mhm.
You mentioned you wanted climate change relocation fund
Right.
up by $50 million. Do you know what the total cost of your relocation would be?
For the total cost we're looking at is $400 million.
400.
And we've probably invested at least 25 up to this point. And that's both through the feds and the state and tribal coffers. And so to get to that point, to move two villages from housing to business to government operations, it's going to take quite a chore to do that. But, you know, it's in process.
I appreciate it. You all come from beautiful places, so sorry you had to come to Washington, but no, we need to get out and see your places too. So
That'd
anyway,
be great.
Representative Pingree.
Yeah, thank you all for testifying. I appreciate it today and appreciate you coming from a long ways away. I know when Derek Kilmer was on the committee with us, he spent a lot of time talking to us about the relocation of the Quinault Nation. And
Yep.
I think it's an issue we're going to continue to deal with on a grander scale. I know in Alaska, some of the tribes have had to relocate, and you're one of the first sort of domestic tribes that's really undertaking it on a big scale. So
I agree.
it's we're going to learn a lot from what you're doing. And thanks for bringing up that tribal resiliency grant. We've heard from other tribes that was one of the areas of funding that's still being blocked. So I think we need to get that loosened up and make sure that the funding we've already appropriated. It's hard enough for us to get money into the budget and get new money, but that was money that was going to tribes. So that's a big concern. And Dr. Nygren, nice to see you, and thank you for kind of giving us a sense of the scale of a very large tribe. And really, we talk a lot about, to tribes of all sizes, but the magnitude of the need of a tribe as large as yours and the amount of funding that is still a shortfall for you is really staggering. And we need to make sure we're meeting the needs of all the tribes. And appreciate hearing from the Wisconsin members. I grew up in Minnesota, so, next door neighbor, but, and again, so many of the same concerns about law enforcement and other needs. And we're going to try to get all we can in this round of appropriations, but thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Let me just follow up. One question I had is that when we were down there, one of the issues that they took us around as we drove across the reservation and stuff was housing. And you had real issues with housing. Is that still a big issue?
Yeah, definitely a huge issue. We still have a demand of about 30,000 plus homes that need to be built on Navajo. But a lot of the challenge is making sure that we have the infrastructure in place. So we've really been trying to figure out how do we continue to make sure, especially on the Arizona side. And I think that's where the water settlement is very key, is so that we can build out the main water lines that could possibly feed a lot of these homes that are needed. So again, housing is definitely still a huge challenge on Navajo, because we have about 200,000 plus that live on the nation and about 200,000 that live off the nation, kind of come on and off the nation throughout the weekends, depending on where they're working in the country. But again, yes, housing is definitely a huge need. And I think that's where a lot of the BIA housing money that does come out. This past year, we were able to do some money that I've been really big on making sure that we try to spend a lot of the funding that does come through BIA. And I think it was around 50 homes that we're able to provide this coming year through some of that BIA housing. But again, 50 houses sounds like a lot, but when in terms of the scale of the nation, as you mentioned earlier, it's a large, vast, and then some of the challenges, just the remoteness as you visited the community out there. But again, as a nation, one of the other things I want to thank this committee, thank Congress, and thank the United States too, is a lot of the ARPA funding. We're going to be able to put out a couple hundred houses on the Navajo Nation using ARPA money. So this coming year and next year, we're going to be able to do, I think we're up to about 700 plus houses. That's going to include a house, including water, electricity, and septic and drain fields as well too. So that's one of the things that we've really been focusing on Navajo is like, why can't we do it? Let's come together and really put some of the resources that comes down from Washington. So I want to commend this committee, commend Congress and the United States for helping us with a lot of those houses we're going to put down over this year and next year as well. And
I suspect that housing is an issue on almost every reservation, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. Hey, thank you all for being here today. I really sincerely mean it. And we as I've told everybody, we actually do take your full testimony and read it and see what we can do to try to address it. And thanks for bringing up the issues that we need to be focused on. So thank you
so much.
You bet. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all for taking time to join us today. We sincerely appreciate all of you coming to testify before our subcommittee. And the committee stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.